All right, we'll get back into it so we can get close to wrapping up. So we left off talking about trying to understand what a restricted covenant is, which is basically a restriction on land use. Now that could be what we call setback lines, where that is space needed for safety, no freestanding structures, or no having no chain link fences, no boats in the yard, no cars regularly parked in the driveway. So these are all things either state or locally decided when it comes to property. Usually it's um, local rules and laws that they expect because they want things to look a certain way, which is okay. So these are things that they are expecting people to follow.
Sorry, sir, your voice is very low. Speak.
No problem. Sorry about that. So again, when we come back to our covenants, these are things that we are restricted on doing based on local law. So, you're parking your RV or your boat in the driveway, or, you know, parking a car in front of your house and not moving it for a day, right? It has to be moved either forward or across the street, or you can't park in front of a certain area between this time and this time. These are all local rules that you're expected to follow. Or you have to use an actual licensed person to do your lawn, to cut your grass, and to do landscaping, right? So these can all be restrictions, separate documents, or they're binding on all purchasers in the subdivision. And how do we enforce these restrictions? Usually by court or by parties of interest. So those that are directly affected by it. So we can have restriction based on heirs and renters, subdivisions, and building. Are owners, mortgage holders, and renters. And usually courts are kind of iffy on enforcing them if there's a change policy, the neighborhood's changed, or if the neighborhood's been abandoned, as in the owners have changed. And liens are interest in properties that are security for an obligation. So it's usually a debt. And they can be from it could be from court damages, it could be from federal tax liens. And you have property tax liens, mechanics liens, and a mortgage lien. And then so you have, when you have levels of liens, the first one is the ones that are always sent out by the government: property taxes, assessment liens. Second would be the mortgage. Mechanics liens are if you had improvements done and you haven't paid for them. And then the last one is a judgment lien, which is from the court. And then you have co-ownership if you want to share with someone, if you don't want to fully own the property itself. So you could be in a condo, you can be in a limited liability, you can be in a corporation, you can be in a partnership, you can be in a trust, which we discussed before. or you can be indirect, which means that if you're not directly, that means that the trust or the partnership owns it, and the ownership passes through the business itself. So you have the opportunity for, lesser tax liability, which is what a lot of people do. So basically, just the co-ownership is just a house with multiple owners. So it's not just you; it could be your family, it could be, another person that you know in business. It could be another organization that owns the business. It could be anyone. And then you have your direct ownership, which is what we call tenancy in common, or joint tenancy, which is survivorship. Husband and wife, or, and your spouse passes away. So usually the default one is tenancy in common, which is multiple owners. And you could sell at any point in time. It doesn't matter. Different sizes, multiple transactions. But if you have multiple investors, bad way to doing this. Or if you own a business, an operating business is a bad way of doing this. Joint tenancy is not really allowed or liked by other places. Usually people like to do tenancy by the entirety, which is basically husband and wife. And it protects against the liens that could arise from each property by themselves, singular. So you're married and your spouse gets sued. They can't come after the house if you're under tenancy by the entirety. And then you have direct co-ownership, which is the condo. And it combines the single ownership of tenancy in common. That's also created by the declaration of the condominium. And then you also have the capability of paying all your obligations, some restrictions on sale or rental. And then you have the ability to vote on changing bylaws. So the question is, if you want to purchase a home, why do people like buying condos? First off, it is the price. You have a lot of amenities. You have 99 times out of 100 security, whether you're in the home or outside of it. Other people do your maintenance and upkeep. And there's always an interesting location where these things are located at. And you naturally have neighbors. So when you're purchasing a condo, there's, design expectations, rules, privacy, parking limits. Then you also have the rules, like you have guest policies, everything on the outside has to look a certain way, and you have the right to rent out. So when you purchase a condo, you have bylaws that you have to read, you have declarations, recent board meetings, legal actions, homeowner associations, and association budget, which is the money that they have for certain things, like maybe a pool table or a pool cleaner or things like that that allow the look of the actual condo to be improved. So if you're in a cooperative or a co-op, which we call it, the corporation owns the property. Everyone that owns a part of it owns a share in a proprietary lease. I can't divide it up. And if in a co-op there's an issue where there's a lien or something like that, everyone is actually responsible for it. And in the co-op, the corporation holds title to all the land and improvements. And if you are married here, you also automatically own a part of the property. So that kind of comes from English common law compared to Spanish common law in California. So that covers all property owned during the marriage. And you also have elective share, which is modern substitute, which the surviving spouse gets a third of all property that they own when they die. And in existence of this is within 25 states. So like I mentioned last week, almost every state is different. There are very few states that are drastically different. A lot of states are the same, but states like California is different than what most states people are used to. Right, so then we have community property, which we talked about last week, which is half 50-50, not property owned before the marriage, but included in the marriage. And that can sometimes include income from separate property, like property that you own that you gain rent on. Your wife is entitled to half. So that'll be in California, Louisiana, Wisconsin, and Alaska, along with a couple of the Spanish states. So then some places you'll have a timeshare, which is a share of ownership in a condominium, right? Where you can go anytime you want. Sometimes there's a financial investment, sometimes there's not. It's a very questionable history. A lot of people complain or sue those that own timeshares just because of practices. And then, right, when we talked about water, who owns it under a body of water? Who controls it? Who has the right to use it? Who has the right to use the groundwater? All of these things are questions that we'll always have that you need to ask before anything, right? So our rights, our oil rights and things like that have what we call implied easement ownership for removal. Means if I own the property that it's on, I can remove it when I feel like it. If someone else wants to pay me to do it, I get to choose how and when that's actually done. Right? So just remember, the ability for real estate is a bundle of rights that we have the potential of owning. There's very many different variations of this, right, from estates to easements and covenants and liens. But we get the right to enjoy it however we want. We own it, and we can get rid of it when we feel like it. Someone else can't be told. And there's also the ability to have more than one owner. But then there's also ability for ownership based upon the fundamental aspect of marriage. Right? So you have the capability of, in marriage, owning parts of property that your spouse owns. It just depends where you are and at what point. So you have a variety of different options to own real estate here in the United States. It's just which is the best route for you to take. What option is best for you? Right? Most people would prefer a common law state because they would get half no matter what, unless it's written differently. Whereas the states that are influenced by English common law can get up to a third. So just some things to think about and keep in mind. All right. Are there any questions? Good. So like I said, I will post the PowerPoints up so that they're in Moodle today. I will see you all next Monday at 7 a.m. bright and early. You guys have a great rest of your day. All right.